So just a bit on gym logic versus everyday life. So once you try to quantify anything, it will assume, so gym logic assumes this sort of special object made for lifting within this special location. Everything is marked, all of the weights are marked, and there's this one way to lift, which is fine within a gym setting, but there is this whole range of movement and strength that gets ignored when we reduce things to sets and reps. It can also be for a lot of people, and I think particularly for women, it can be quite a disempowering narrative because at the center of gym culture is that there is one person who holds the knowledge and everybody else has to kind of ask how to do things, which I think is maybe not a very holistic way of learning. Again, there's place for this. I'm not saying this is all terrible. We use prescriptive teaching in a lot of what we do, but I do feel like the balance is slightly off in sort of general
Yeah.
exercise
Um,
and fitness.
my own point would be as well is I think sometimes we spend a lot of time just thinking that everything is the gym. We lose the forest through the trees, and sometimes you see these funny arguments on social media where you'll see someone who's picking up a rock or a box or like a heavy sandbag or something, not in a gym situation. People will say, "Oh, no, you have to do it this way," and they'll impose this specific form or points of performance on how people should move. As if you were picking up a special barbell that was a certain height in a certain position, and not allowing for the fact that actually in real life there's lots of different ways to pick things up that are safe and effective, and how the environment is going to dictate that. You know, if you're standing on uneven ground, as opposed to perfectly flat ground, if you're trying to move something, that's going to be a different goal than if you're trying to pick it up. You know, is the object wobbly? All these different kinds of things that occur in real life. Um, that sometimes people forget, oh, well, if you're doing things in a different context, actually, you might move differently as well. So this forest through the trees problem shows up quite a lot when you see people who've only thought about how to move something in gym context and not actually take into account what it means if you're helping your friend move or you're moving a sofa or picking up a sleeping child and, you know, putting them in their bed, things like
I think
that.
also, I think also within the sort of disempowering narrative, so I think it means that a lot of us were brought up where we think that we're lifting something wrong or we're doing something wrong because we've only been taught within this prescriptive narrative, and actually in life there are many ways to do the thing.
Yeah. And there's a lot of sort of gatekeeping, not even overt or not even consciously, but there is, you know, there's this idea of disabling professions, you know, or this idea of de-skilling where once you sort of professionalize anything, you know, a lot of times people can sort of become alienated from their own abilities. So if you have an organization that tells you this is the right way to do something, the wrong way to do something, then all of a sudden you know you believe that you have to pay them to find the right way, and it's really sad. Sometimes we'll have participants in classes and say, "Oh, you know, I garden, but I'm probably sitting in the wrong position when I garden, and you know, sometimes I move pots of whatever potting soil, but I'm probably doing it wrong." And it's like, well, you know, in all honesty, if you've been living in this world, in the real world, for X amount of years, you've probably found movement solutions that work for you. You know, and there's nothing wrong with finding more options and creating more variability in how you move and building strength and everything. But generally, it's not very helpful to have, you know, someone who represents a certain, I don't know, proprietary moving organization say, no, you should never live like this or you should never live like that. Because quite frankly, a lot of those statements aren't really based on scientific fact. They're just sort of based on superstition that's been passed down.
Which leads us nicely on to this is from Kurt Vonnegut, who you may be familiar with, but it's a nice way of thinking about what gets lost when we try to do things really efficiently. So he said, I'm to his wife who's going out to get an envelope, and she said, "You're not a poor man. Why don't you buy 1,000 envelopes and they'll deliver them, and then you can put them in the closet?" And I say, and then you see the picture, and when he goes out to buy the envelope, he interacts with people around him. He gets to go for a walk. He maybe gets to spend a bit of time in nature. He will say hello to the person that he's buying the envelope from, and then he'll walk home. So all of that richness is lost in when if he tried to buy 1,000 envelopes. It's just quite a nice way of thinking about what gets lost when we try
Yeah.
to make everything very efficient.
It's yeah, exactly. It's sometimes thinking about the why, you know, like a lot of times the why we do things is not just what can be quantified. It's all the rich texture that happens underneath. So him, Kurt Vonnegut going and buying the envelope, it's not just about buying the envelope, it's an excuse for him to see his friends, catch up, hear gossip, go into town and things like that. And I think that's one of the issues is when we try to reduce physical activity to just exercise and sets and reps and intensity and things like that, we miss the richness of all the other things we do. And it's sometimes, I remember when I used to be a personal trainer, people would say, "Oh, well, I used to play five-a-side football and garden, but I've stopped doing those, so now I can go to the gym and exercise instead." And that always made me really sad because it meant that they weren't going out and spending time with their friends or getting the joy that they get from gardening. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with going to the gym. I still go to the gym as well. But I think it's when we think that that's the whole world and we ignore all the other benefits of other kinds of movements that can also develop strength and even help develop things like balance and bone density and all these other things that are really important for quality of life.
So yeah, we're taught that strength lives in numbers and how much weight and how many reps, which is true to a certain extent. But because those things are easy to measure, they often end up overshadowing everything else.